this really confounds me. We have this great freedom of speech, but then we seem to start getting in our own way. What's this about?
Well, you're right to be concerned about the erosion of freedom of speech. And even though we continue to have very strong legal rights to freedom of speech, those don't really mean anything if people don't feel free to actually engage in it. And I think part of the reason is that having freedom of speech is unusual in the sense of history and culturally. And it makes people uncomfortable, especially when you are exposed on social media to so many different kinds of people and so many different kinds of views that you might not be used to in your own, in your own neighborhood, among your own family. And so seeing those is uncomfortable for people. And so it's natural for people to be uncomfortable with hearing from people or seeing messages from people that aren't like them. But if we're going to have a diverse, democratic society, we need to be able to handle that kind of thing and have that tolerance.
We are a society with free speech, but there are limits to this. Jessica, what are the limits to the free speech?
So that's a great question. And of course, in the Constitution, it says there shall be no law. But what we really mean is that we want a robust freedom of expression with a lot of exceptions. So, one exception, which you just pointed to, is incitement. Another is something called fighting words. And we can understand why those exceptions are there. The same thing with respect to, for instance, defamation, where we're trying to balance living in a society where we do support free expression and free exchange of ideas, even if we get hurt feelings, because we think that censorship from the government is a greater harm than hurt feelings. But we also want to, for instance, when it comes to incitement, fighting word, defamation, we do want to protect individuals, even if it sometimes means the government saying you don't get to say that.
Yeah, and that's just good public policy too. I mean, common law follows from good public policy, and even though this is constitutional, we are saying, like when we talk about incitement, you can't say things that incite people to violence. But when we're talking about a situation like Kimberly here, where she's not trying to incite people, she's not defaming anyone, she's not talking about anybody at all. There's no object that she's aiming at. She's just talking about herself. She's just being expressive. And
Correct.
some people might say, well, I wouldn't say that, so I don't want you to say that. That's where the problem arises.
Over the years, we'd seen a lot of cases where students were being punished for saying things online or saying things that offended people, but had nothing to do with their ability to be a student, to be professional in their workplaces, and we've seen the abuse of these professionalism standards that, like Kim indicated, they might say, well, this isn't professional. Well, what about it isn't professional? Well, it's kind of a matter of opinion, and so particularly for the University of Tennessee's health science campus, which is an agency of the government, to say like, well, the government, these agents of the government say, we don't think you're sufficiently professional and we're not really going to explain it, and now you're expelled. If the government has the power to do that to you, they have the power to, really change and take away your right to get a job, your ability to have a career, without any real restrictions on them at all, in just a purely arbitrary fashion. And that's a scary place to live.
Well,
And I'll just note here, to this day,
please.
none of my patients have asked me for my social media before vetting me as their pharmacist.
Yeah.
Before they pick up their medication, they do not ask for my Instagram handle. So, it's just ridiculous that I'm being held to this impossible standard.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.